Yeah. Sure, being an IPSCO guy, you already know there's still people in Portage that are.
Yep, the final 1,000.
If it's down to like 2 or 3 people each bit, those guys will land. All right, I think we got everything tech related on now. We had as many of you guys did, probably power outage for at least a little bit and messes with all the settings. We are in Job chapter 29. This is lesson 7. If you have your workbook, page 15 of that workbook. Job 29. I'm going to go back to where this was originally. There, I feel more centered. Okay, so last class we talked about chapter 28. It's a chapter with a little bit different tone than the other chapters. Sometimes it's called the Hymn to Wisdom. It is written in a very poetic way. The dispute about who wrote it, was it Job? I think it could be. It could maybe Solomon or David later on, who were the ones who put the book down. Perhaps there are a lot of ideas we talked about that sound like Proverbs and Psalms and Ecclesiastes. So, but ultimately, I fully believe it belongs with the book, and it was meant to kind of be an answer to a lot of the things that Job and his friends had said. And the real author is the Holy Spirit, who's behind all of the humans that were writing. While it's interesting to think about who wrote it, it's in its place. But ultimately, where are we going to find wisdom? I'll just start with that question. With the Lord, right? And he said there's no end to which people will search for treasures. They will go to the bottom of the ocean and look for pearls. They will dig into the mountains and look for gold and all sorts of stuff. And they are endlessly curious. We are looking out to the stars, looking down to the sea, but you can't find it unless you fear God and flee from sin, right? Departing from evil. That's what real understanding is. So ultimately, that justifies Job in a lot of what he said, right? That is Job searching for meaning with God, and he's someone who kept his integrity and tried his best to stay away from evil. Now, the next couple chapters are going to shift back to Job. If we're thinking about this as a courtroom, which I told you the first class is maybe a good way to think about it, this is sort of Job's closing argument, his final arguments. And we know it's Job saying it because one, Job again took up his discourse and said. So this is his final speech in the book. I'm going to start with reading chapter 29, and we will talk through this a little bit. Job again took up his discourse and said, "Oh, that I were in months gone by, as in the days when God walked with me, when his lamp shone on my head, by light I walked through darkness, as I was in the prime of my days, when the friendship of God was over my tent, the Almighty was yet with me, and my children were around me. When my steps were bathed in butter, and the rock poured on me were streams of oil. When I went to the gate of the city, when I took my seat in the square, the young men saw me and hid themselves, and the old men arose and stood. The voice of the nobles was hushed, their tongue stuck to their palate. When the ear heard, it called me blessed. When the eye saw, it gave witness of me. Because I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the orphans who had no help. Blessed is the one ready to perish came upon me. I made the widow's heart sing for joy. I put on righteousness, clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind, feet to the lame. I was father to the needy. I investigated the case which I did not know. I broke the jaws of the wicked. I snatched the prey from his teeth. And then I thought, I shall die in my nest. I shall multiply my days as the sand. My root is spread out to the waters, and dew lies all night on my branch. That my glory is ever new with me. My bow is renewed in my hand. To me they listened and waited and kept silent for my counsel. After my words they did not speak again, and my speech dropped on them. They waited for me as for the rain, and opened their mouth as for the spring rain. I smiled on them when they did not believe, and the light of my face they did not cast down. I chose a way for them chief. I dwelt as king among the troops, as one who comforted the mourners. So let's talk a little bit about Job's glory days. Sure. Is it not working real well? All right. What are some ways that Job describes his glory days? What was it like before all this stuff happened to him, the misfortunes of the book? We'll start with Jerry.
Oh, he was well respected because of his generosity and wisdom and godliness. And also, he was a protector of the poor and those that were being taken advantage of.
Good. Other observations? Harvey and then Connie.
Yeah, he was saying that he was giving thanks basically for the wealth it had, like the butter, the oil. That was just a sign of wealth right there, and Job was acknowledging he was extremely wealthy in that respect.
Yeah, good.
And he was giving counsel to the people that needed him.
Yeah. Kind of a reversal of this book, right? Because here he is and his friends are trying to give him counsel, not doing a great job at it, and they're just trying to give him advice and comfort and all these things. He says, there was a time when I was doing that for other people. And he was kind of good at it, right? At least according to his words, unlike the sorry comforters that they are. This is kind of a defense against what his friend Eliphaz said, right? Remember, Eliphaz said, if bad stuff happens to you that's this bad, the only explanation is you must be doing the worst of the worst, right? And that's like stealing from orphans and widows and getting, taking care or not taking care of travelers and taking advantage of them, not paying the wages of your workers, things like that. So this is kind of an answer. He's like, you guys know who I was. When I lived the good life, people respected me, right? I thought it was kind of interesting. What happens when the young men see him? They hide, right? It's like, he's so important. He's greater than me. What happens when the old men see him? They rise, right? Attention, they're all standing. Wow, Job's walking in. So the guys that are older than him gave him respect. He talks about princes, right? They're like, I'll stick my tongue to the top of my mouth. I'm not going to talk anymore. So apparently, and I don't know if he's exaggerating with a little bit of flowery language, I don't know, but he truly was the greatest man in all the East at that time. And his wisdom was respected and honored. He comforted other people. He took care of them. He even was serving the role of judge, wasn't he? What did it say about him as a judge? Thinking like verses 15 on. There's some there. 14 too. Got Harvey over here.
Basically, he was saying he was clothed with truth and justice is what he was saying. You know, and I can see where he could say that because, you know, everything he did seems to me like was for better of other people. And at this point, you know, Job had to know he was a righteous man. And I imagine he racked his brain day in and day out to figure out what he did to bring all this on him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so in this day and age, it was like a tribal sort of a setting. And so kind of the elders of the village would get together and decide cases. They would sit in the city gates and figure out what's going on. He talked about himself as an investigator. So somebody would bring them a case, maybe accusing their neighbor of stealing or some kind of injustice. And he says, I'd go investigate, you know, and I'd seek it out, the truth. I'd find out who's lying, who's telling the truth. I'd get to the bottom of it. And if someone was taking advantage of someone who was poor, he meted out justice. I don't know if he means he personally socked him in the jaw or if it's kind of a metaphor of like, I made sure that they got what was coming to them in punishment. But they did live in a day and age with eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So he might have punched a few people in the jaw, which that kind of gives you a little bit different picture of Job, right? He's like this, almost like enforcer of the law, as well as a judge of the law, but he does it righteously. And so if you rob a widow, Job's going to come punch you in the mouth. It's kind of the picture. And once he finds out what you did wrong, and there's no escaping from his judgment. By the way, I think this is really interesting because the way he's been talking about God, right? So he knows what it's like to be an investigator, to be a judge, to be punishing the wicked. He knows what it's like to be generous, to benefit the poor and those that are needy. And he was trying to pattern his life after what he thought God was and all the things he wanted from God. But then here he was feeling like God had abandoned him, that God hadn't seen or noticed or cared. I want you to look at the language again towards the beginning of the chapter. Notice what he says, this is verse 4, 29:4, when I was in the prime of my days, the friendship of God was over my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, and my children were around me. So, here's my question. Was God still his friend? I think the implication is yes, right? He wonders how does that work, though, right? He doesn't feel like God is his friend anymore in his perspective. And, by the way, is God with him? Is the Almighty with him? I think we would agree he is, right? Do you know what your life would be like without the Almighty? Hell. That's what it is, right? Eternal punishment. There is nobody on the face of this planet living who knows what it's like to be without God. To borrow from what Paul says to the Colossians, our very atoms are held together by the will of Jesus Christ, right? He spoke our lives into existence. He formed us in the womb. He knew who he'd be from the start. He knew the paths our lives would take. And God causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust, right? Even wicked people have good happen to them sometimes. So none of us really know what it's like to be without God. Granted, he feels like God is not there anymore. And so maybe we have felt that at times. Like, I wonder where God is. It feels like the only time I'm hearing from God is when something new, bad is happening. And I think maybe I've shared this before. One thing that I struggle with as a parent is when you have a kid who's kind of going through a phase in life where you have to discipline them a lot or get them in trouble a lot. And I just get tired of, like, I just want to, like, hug my kid and play with my kid and be friends with my kid. And I'm tired of saying no. I'm tired of saying, I'm taking that away. You can't have that. I'm tired of saying no dessert. I'm tired of being the mean dad. But there are seasons of life where even though I love my kid, I have to be the harsh one, right? But we understand in parenting that you would actually be a bad parent if you enabled your child to do everything that they ever wanted to do, and there was never a consequence, there was never boundaries or rules, right? So the truth is, God is there, but God For this point, he said no, or not yet. God said, hold on. God said, wait, be patient. That was his answer as Job was praying for help in his prayers. And that's a very hard thing to hear, right? And so I just want us to think about this. He feels like God's not there. He feels like God must hate him now instead of being his friend. That's not the case, but that is exactly what he feels in this moment. He's exposed and alone. And the thing that he tried to be for everybody else, that's all he wanted for himself, but he hasn't found it in his best friends. He says, I always stuck up for the innocent and the poor and the downtrodden and those that have been taken advantage of. And that's really all I wanted. But he has not received it from God in his mind, and he's not received it from his friends for sure. Any other thoughts on this chapter? By the way, does this sound a little bit Christ-like to you? The descriptions of what Job says he was? I don't know about you, but for me, when I read this, like, I was eyes to the blind, I was the legs for the lame, like, I was clothed with justice, taking care of the poor and the widow and the orphan. Like, when I read this, I see somebody living a godly example, and to me, it sounds like someone who pre-shadows Jesus Christ. I don't know, I just can't help but read it and see that, because think how Jesus was always there for those that it seems like the rest of the world had forgotten about. And in their day and age, by the way, they thought just like Job's friends did. Do you remember the story of the man born blind in John 9? Do you remember the question they asked in John 9? Whenever they see this guy, he's blind, he's a beggar. Do you guys remember? Yeah. Did his parents sin so bad that their son was born blind? As if a birth defect was the fault of sin, a direct result of their personal sin. They believed the same thing, didn't they? Right? Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, and there's no exceptions. Like, that's the way they talked and they thought. They hadn't learned anything from the book of Job, at least those people that were saying those sorts of things. But even today, do you ever feel that way? Do you ever feel like life should be easier? Life isn't fair. Why aren't things going my way? God, where are you? You're not there for me. Right? We still feel that way. Like, if we're good, we feel like good things should be happening. And we wonder, why does bad people get away with stuff? You know? And why haven't they been caught yet? Why doesn't anybody know the truth about the lies they're telling? And we wonder the same, because sometimes injustice lasts a long time. So, as much as times have changed, I don't think our thinking has changed all that much, right? We're still asked to have faith in God. And if you're looking at the question sheet, all of these things kind of show that Eliphaz was just making up lies, right? Saying things that were not true. And I really do think it sounds like it's kind of a direct answer to some of those accusations from earlier. Any final thoughts before I read a bit of chapter 30? All right. Chapter 30 is a little bit longer, 31 verses, starting in verse 1. But now those younger than I mock me, whose fathers I disdained to put with the dogs of my flock. Indeed, what good was the strength of their hands to me? Vigor had perished from them. From want and famine they are gaunt, who gnaw the dry ground by night in the waste and desolation, who pluck mallow by the bushes, whose food is the root of the broom shrub. They are driven from the community. They shout against them as against a thief. So they dwell in dreadful valleys, in holes of the earth and the rocks. Among the bushes they cry out. Under the nettles they're gathered together. Fools, even those without a name, they were scourged from the land. But now I have become their taunt. I have even become a byword to them. They abhor me, and they stand aloof from me. They do not refrain from spitting at my face, because he's loosed his bowstring and afflicted me. They have cast off the bridle before me. On the right hand their brood arises. They thrust aside my feet and build up against me their ways of destruction. They break up my path
They profit from my destruction, and no one restrains them. As through a wide breach they come, amid the tempest they roll on. Terrors are turned against me. They pursue my honor as the wind, and my prosperity has passed away like a cloud. All right, we'll stop there for a second. So he starts out by describing a certain group of people. Who are these kind of outlaws or outcasts that he's describing here? Go ahead, Jerry.
They're the young people, and they're just totally disrespecting him, and they're tripping him, and he can't defend himself, and they know that, and they're just really messing with him.
Yeah. So, and these are kind of the rowdy youth. These are the ones that are the troublemakers. And by the way, how did they get to be in the situation they were in the first place? Did you notice that? Yeah. So imagine the criminals that got kicked out of the community. That's who he says. Their fathers are the ones who were these rotten people. And part of my judgment as being one of the elders, we said, you're exiled. You can't live in town anymore. You're a violent person. You're a bad person. Get out of here. And so they've been living out in the wilderness like criminals. And it's like the sons of the criminals that I exiled. Now they're the ones, they're tripping me. They're spitting on me. They're making fun of me. And they're calling me names, right? They're scrounging around for a living, eating like roots and stuff in the desert. And now they're calling me a piece of trash. You know, this is about as bad as it can get, right? His fortunes have completely reversed. Anything else you notice about his reputation, what we notice here? Go ahead.
I just think it's interesting. We spend a lot of time talking about his, up to this point, and even when I think of Job, I don't necessarily think of this side of things with him, right? That it was not just a fall from losing his family, losing his possessions. It was a fall from a position of power in the community, in a position of respect, and somebody that everybody looked to, and now he's just a nobody. And so that's just something that, at least for me, I usually overlook that side of it. Just it's one thing to have. It's just another side of the extreme situation he was put in.
Kicked him while he was down, right? As if it couldn't get worse. He had to deal with the social ostracization, however that word is. He's an exile now, right? Good. Anything else you notice about his role in the community here? By the way, once again, who does he credit for his misfortune? Same person he's credited the whole time, right? God, right? If you look down, he talks about he's loosed his bowstring and afflicted me. It's like God sitting way up in heaven, and he aimed an arrow right at me, hit me square in the target, right? And God did this to me. We've talked before, I really don't know how much knowledge they had of Satan and what Satan does and how Satan works. But he absolutely felt like God had targeted him and been grinding him into the ground and hurting him and all these things. That verse is also interesting. Notice at the end of verse 11, he says, they've cast the bridle off before me. So I think he's once again talking about some of those criminals. It's almost as if he was complete control. The community had a good order. The criminals stayed out of town, the ruffians, because they knew Job's in charge. But now that Job is kind of failing, they've reared up their ugly heads, and they're starting to cause trouble again because, hey, he can't stop us. And so it's like a horse got rid of its bridle. You can't control it anymore. A horse is way more powerful than a human, but if you put that bit in the mouth, you can direct them anywhere you want to go. But once that bridle's gone, they're on the go. They're running. And so I don't think, here's another side of it, to go to what Maverick said, the community crime level has probably gone up. It'd be like if you took out someone who was the police chief or something like that, right? Someone who enforced the law, because the way he investigated and punched criminals and exiled them, like, he probably was like their police chief. And so people are emboldened to do more evil because of what's going on. It's just kind of an ugly situation all around, right? It's like through a wide breach they come. Think about it, like the wall had been guarding them, and now the enemy has a way in. Go ahead, Harvey.
You know, in Eastern culture, from what I understand, dogs were pretty low. And you could tell these people, they were even lower than
Yeah.
dogs. So, that put these people down pretty low.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we like to think of dogs as these nice pets. They were generally scavengers in their culture. They served a role of kind of cleaning up, things like that. And so, yeah, these guys are lower than the stray dogs that were gnawing bones on the streets and stuff like that. So, yeah, and looking at his reputation, verses 14 and 15, he talks about terrors are turned against me. They pursue my honor as the wind. My prosperity is passed by like a cloud. He's got nothing left. It's all evaporated. You think about that fog that comes in the morning sometimes, and it gets pretty thick around here. But as soon as the sun comes out, it's gone. That is kind of how wealth is, though, isn't it? Wealth can be that way. People who have their whole life together, everything's going great for them. It doesn't take long for disgrace to come in and wipe them out. And we sometimes see that people deserve it. Maybe someone gets caught in a sin or, gets arrested for something, some kind of fraud or criminal enterprise. The problem with Job here is it's not through something he did to deserve all of this. But it is interesting, once again, do we see a Christ picture in this? I think we do. In fact, criminals kind of taunting him, wagging their heads at him. This sounds very much like what happens on the cross. Anything Job went through, Jesus went through. Really, if you think about it. And we're going to read more of that even. But they also spit on him and things like that, which Jesus unfortunately got spit on. Let's go ahead and read this. And I want you to see Jesus in this, the suffering, righteous servant, starting in verse 16. Now my soul is poured out within me. Days of affliction have seized me. At night it pierces my bones within me. My gnawing pains take no rest. By a great force my garments distorted. It binds me about the collar of my coat. Cast me into the mire. I become like dust and ashes. I cry out to you for help, but you do not answer me. I stand up, and you turn your attention to me. You become cruel to me. When the might of your hand, you persecute me. You lift me up to the wind and cause me to ride. You dissolve me in a storm. For I know that you'll bring me to death and the house of meeting for the living. Yet does not one in a heap of ruins stretch out his hand? Or in his disaster therefore cry out for help? Have I not wept for the one whose life is hard? Was not my soul grieved for the needy? When I expected good, then evil came. When I waited for light, then darkness came. I am seething within and cannot relax. Days of affliction confront me. Lost my spot. I go about mourning without comfort. I stand up in the assembly, cry out for help. I become a brother to the jackals, companion of ostriches. My skin turns black on me, my bones burn with fever, and therefore my harp is tuned to mourning, and my flute to the sound of those who weep. All right. Let's just talk a bit. Of course, Jesus seems echoed in this, but can you think of other people in the Bible that went through some tough circumstances who their situation, this might remind you? David, good. Right. A lot of times he talks about being out in the wilderness, on the run, enemies are after him, he's the lowest of the low, he feels betrayed, a lot of that sort of stuff, right? The Psalms are packed with it, especially some of the early Psalms. Good. Who else goes through some similar types of things in their life? Good. Yeah, there was certainly some times in Moses' life once he got exiled from Egypt, and then later on when his own people, he's supposed to be leading them, and they keep calling for his death, even though he's trying to keep them alive. He's speaking truth and justice for people, but then it's thankless, right? Nobody's there for him when he needs them. Good. Who else does some of these words sound like? Paul? I think certainly. Yeah, there was a time when Paul was like the chief in his religion. Everybody looked to him with respect. He was loved in the synagogues in Jerusalem and the temple. And then he becomes this prisoner who's downcast. People ignore him, treat him like dirt, try to kill him, things like that, right? I think Paul's another suffering servant that fits into that same mold. Elijah, certainly. Think about Ahab and Jezebel, how much they hated Elijah, ran him out into the wilderness. He had to live in hiding and, chase him down, and he felt alone, right? Job feels very much alone, despite his righteousness. I think especially Elijah is a righteous sufferer, and his words, there's moments he feels kind of hopeless, right? No one said the big one that I came up with, but can you think of another prophet who had a lot of bad days? A whole lot of bad days. Jeremiah. We call him the weeping prophet. That's his nickname, right? Because pretty much half his book is him crying. So, but he describes a lot of the same pains and feelings, how the emotional pain turned into physical pain. By the way, I do think he really had physical pain too. He talks about fevers and his bones hurting and stuff like that. I'm guessing there was lasting scars from having boils from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. But I think there's an emotional ache and pain here too, which sounds so much like Jeremiah. He's the only voice of truth, and the king literally throws his letter of warning into the fire to warm his hands, right? The king doesn't want to listen to the book of Jeremiah. And he gets cast into the mire and sinks down into the pit. He's thrown into a well and sinks down in the mud, which is the very same language that's here. There's been other times that I really feel like the book of Job and Jeremiah have similar wording, and I think Jeremiah probably had access to the book of Job, just because there's so many similarities between the suffering language. Any others? Harvey? Good. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. David is another one of those, right? There's a lot of good guys who went through bad stuff, isn't there? Isn't it funny that the point is being proved over and over again? The point of this book that they got wrong, they thought, good stuff happens to good people, bad stuff happens to bad people. We just listed 6 or 7 exceptions to this rule. And we know that that's not the case. Sometimes good people have bad stuff happen to them. Sometimes bad people have good stuff happen to them for longer than it should. This world isn't fair, right? This world is broken. This world is, Paul in Romans 8 talks about the world groaning. The whole world itself is aching for something better because sin has tainted this world and made it ugly. And this world is just not how it's meant to be, right? Any other thoughts about the idea of being a righteous sufferer or things you've noticed at the end of this chapter here? How important is it that we acknowledge bad things happen? And why? Why is it important we acknowledge Christians have bad days? What do you think? You got a hand? Go ahead, Maverick.
Because that's reality. And that's just how life is. We live in a broken world. If we allow every little bad thing to pull us away from God, then the he's winning.
Good. It's the truth, right? And go ahead, Laura.
I think it's important for Christians to know, because you become a follower of Christ, your life isn't going to be perfect. You're not going to be wealthy. You're not going to have all the best things in life, because this really isn't our life. This is just what we have here on earth. And it's important to realize that and know that just because you're suffering does not mean that God is not with you.
Yeah. We need that reminder, don't we? I think generally, work hard, love your neighbor, do good stuff. Life is good, but there's so many exceptions to the rule that we need that reminder that you got to serve God anyway, even when it doesn't work out that way. Go ahead, Joanne.
Well, in James, it says the testing of your faith brings patience. So we do gain something. We
Good.
get stronger and we get patient.
Yeah. If we don't have a purpose in it all, it's hopeless, isn't it? We have to remind ourselves that there's something we can learn even in those dark moments. Good. Go ahead.
Part of becoming like Christ is learning to suffer as he suffered. And First Peter talks a lot about that. But I mean, we should, and Paul does too in different places, that we should expect to suffer, and we need to identify with him and his sufferings. And that is part of being a Christian.
Good. And Peter was clear to acknowledge the difference between suffering as a Christian, suffering as a righteous sufferer, versus suffering as an evildoer. If you do bad stuff, you deserve something, right? However, God sometimes shows mercy and doesn't give it to you. But sometimes we're going to suffer as a Christian, and we ought to expect that to happen sometimes. And as you share in the sufferings of Christ, to whatever degree you do, you're blessed, right? It makes us like him, and it's creating a better version of us. But have you ever thought about how that's actually kind of built into nature? I don't know if I've ever thought about this before. And maybe this is just because my brain is thinking about this kind of stuff, but think about how sometimes difficult things have to take place for good things to occur. There are certain seeds. You have to do something called scarification. You have to take sandpaper and scratch the seeds up in order for them to grow. There are plants, you've got to prune them real heavy for them to look better the next year. Our muscles, when we work out, there's little micro tears, and then the muscles come back stronger. Obviously, you don't want to totally break your muscle, but those little microscopic tears. We understand refining. You take impure metal, and out comes the precious stuff on the other side when you burn off the impurity. Nature itself teaches us that sometimes good stuff comes out on the other end of something harsh, some kind of difficult force, right? And so, as much as we'd like the rule to be do good stuff always happens to you, do bad stuff immediately happens to you, life teaches us something very different, even nature itself. And to learn to see, I don't know why this is happening to me, but what might I learn from this to make me a better believer? What might I learn from this to help me come out stronger on the other side? And you may never get to the bottom of why you're suffering, but you can always learn something from it, right? Go ahead.
You know, if you look at the big picture, suffering, look what Christ suffered, what it brought us. And, you know, if you look at it, I guess we suffer today, whatever it is. If we can, live through it, we should come out on the other side stronger and be able to give more thanks for that. Most people just give in to suffering or pain, and then they just give up.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The worst thing ever happened to Jesus, and the best result ever came from it, right? Good point. Go ahead.
This is so funny because we were just talking today about when we were younger, we had it really rough. We were saving pennies just to get gas, even though gas was a lot cheaper. I'd taken a tire down the hill to get air because we couldn't afford a new tire. We had it pretty rough, and this is before we became Christians. Now, this one turned out well, but it also shows you have to have patience. But we started going to church over there in Hobart. Things started to get better and better, and it took years, but it taught me, we've mentioned it quite a few times, how blessed we are. I just can't get over, I don't know how God has done some of this happen in our life, but we give God the glory. And so you might not know it right away, but if you look back and say, wow, what a big difference. Now, it could have gone the other way too, but for us, it worked out great.
Yeah. In the middle of it, it's hard to see any positive end, but it's amazing what can happen on the other side of it, right? And I think probably everybody here has been through something. You know, I think we're all here old enough that we've gone through some sort of hardship at some point. And it's not that you ever want that to happen, but you are who you are today based on how you've come through these obstacles and how you've come through these things. Now, it can make a worse version of you, but I think for a lot of believers, it ends up you learn to trust in God more, or you love God's family more, love other Christians more. Maybe you come to love your family more, you know. There can be good that comes out on the other side, but it's really, really hard to see it while you're in the midst of it. Robin has a comment over here too. So, but I think that's valuable to remember. You don't know what your life is going to look like in the future, right? Go ahead.
And another aspect of that is when we come through it well, we are more equipped to weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice, and to offer something to those who are suffering, you know, to help them through something. And so it is a blessing that we do have trials and that we can help each other. I mean, I think it's a way God equips us to help one another.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I still keep thinking about something Joanne said last week about how people were so kind to her in the hospital, and she learned some things through some hard things and loss, and she's been able to help share those with other people. You know, I don't ever wish any bad thing to happen on anybody, but if it does happen to you, the hope is that you can be strengthened, and in time, you can know what it felt like to go through that. See, Job knew what it was like to be a good comforter. And that's why it hurt so much that he didn't have anybody else. You better believe Job was going to be the best comforter ever after all this was said and done, right? Because he knows what he needed during this time, and he didn't have it. And so that's what I've always heard. Be the person that you needed to someone else. You know, if you're young and struggling, if you're in pain, if you're going through loss, and you don't get what you need in that time from your friends and family and stuff, people on earth, then you need to turn around and be the right person for somebody else. Instead of growing cynical and forgetting life, and I give up on people. They were never there for me when I needed them, so I won't be there for them. Instead of that, turn around and be the person that you needed in those dark moments. And I think God can shape us into good comforters, wise people, those that lift up the weak. And until you've known hardship of doing what you got to do with the tire and all of that, saving pennies for gas. Until you know that, you don't know hardship, you can't really appreciate the difficulty someone else is going through. But since you have, you can help out and you can be there for other people. Any other final thoughts on chapter 30? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Always something to be thankful for. I like that note to end a class. Chapter 31 is really cool. We're going to talk about, it's funny, we always talk about the Proverbs 31 woman. It's helpful for me to think about the Job 31 man. So you think about the ideal kind of man you want to be, or the ideal kind of person you want to be married to. We're talking Job 31. And we'll see the kind of character that he had and talk about the ideas in that chapter. I plan to probably spend all of Sunday night's class on chapter 31 before we get into the next section. So look that over, answer the questions if you can, and we'll look forward to that next class. I guess I couldn't tell from here. Was it cutting in and out or something?
Right. Good evening, everyone. We'll start with I Found a Friend, number 319. You know the note already. Oh, so. I found a friend, oh, such a friend. He loved me ere I knew him. He drew me with the cords of love, and thus he bound me to him. And round my heart still closely twine those ties which naught can sever. For I am his, and he is mine, forever and forever. I found a friend, oh, such a friend. He bled, he died to save me, and not alone the gift of life, but his own self he gave me. Not that I have mine own I call, I hold it for the giver. For my heart, my strength, my life, my all are his, and his forever. I found a friend, oh, such a friend, so kind and true and tender, so wise a counselor and guide, so mighty a defender. From him who loves me now so well, what power my soul can sever? Shall life or death, shall earth or hell, know I am his forever.
That's better. Today I want us to look at affection in God, affection in the commandments of God, affection in the house and worship of God, affection in heavenly things, affection in Christ, and affection in the people of God. First, let's look at how affection should be supremely set upon God. In Mark 12, we see the Pharisees and the Herodians trying to catch Jesus at his words. They ask him about paying taxes and marriage and about the greatest commandment of all. Then in Mark 12, we read verses 28 through 34. Then one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, perceived that he had answered them well, asked him, "Which is the first commandment of all?" Jesus answered him, "The first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like it. It is, You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." So the scribe said to him, "Well said, teacher, you have spoken the truth, for there is one God, and there is no one but he. And to love him with all heart, with all understanding, with all the soul, and with all strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself, more than all the whole burnt offerings and sacrifices." Now when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." But after that, no one dared question him. So we see we are to love God with all our heart, our soul, our mind, and strength. Now let's look at how affection should be set upon the commandments of God. I'll be reading from Psalms 19, and the book of Psalms is filled with a lot of great writings. And in chapter 19, we see how wonderful the commandments of the Lord are. I'll be reading verses 8 through 10. "The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb." This verse says a lot about how the Lord's commandments are right and pure. They rejoice in the heart, they enlighten the eyes, they endure forever, that God's judgments are true and righteous, and that we should desire them. The more we read our Bibles, the more we can learn about these commandments. Now let's look at how affection can be set upon the house and worship of God. In Psalms 26:8, "Lord, I have loved the habitation of your house and the place where your glory dwells." And in Psalms 27:4 through 6, "One thing I have desired of the Lord, that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For in time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion, in the secret place of his tabernacle he shall hide me. He shall set me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me. Therefore I will offer sacrifices of joy in his tabernacle. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises to the Lord." The psalmist writes wonderful things about the house of God under the new law of Christ. We should also love worship and God's church. We see in 1 Corinthians 11 that the church there had divisions among them, and they partook of the Lord's Supper in an improper manner. And that can be an example to us, that we should always treat worship to the Lord with affection and respect. Now let's look at affection should be set upon heavenly things. I'll be reading from Colossians 3. We read in verses 1 and 2. "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth." The writer lets us know that those who were baptized were raised with Christ. So those who are Christians should seek these things from above. We should set our mind on spiritual things, not on things of this earth. And we should have our affection set upon Christ. I'll be reading from Matthew 10. Here we see just how much we are to love Christ. We just don't like Christ a little bit. We just don't tolerate him. We love him. Matthew 10, I'll read verses 37 through 40. "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. So we are to love Christ more than father and mother, more than son and daughter. We are to take up our cross and follow Christ. And we are to lose our life for his sake. And if we receive Christ, we also receive God, the one who sent Christ. We should also have our affection set upon the people of God. I'll be reading from Romans 12. Here we see just how we are to treat fellow Christians. Those who are in the body of Christ treat each other in a special way, and that the scripture speaks to that special treatment. I'll be reading from Romans 12. I'll read verses 10 through 16. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love. In honor, give preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer, distributing to the needs of the saints, given to hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. As Christians, we are to be affectionate to one another and give preference to one another. We rejoice in hope. We are patient in tribulation. We continue in prayer. We give to the saints in need. We are given to hospitality. We bless others and do not curse. We rejoice and weep with our brethren. We are of the same mind. And if we go over some of the things that we spoke about today, we see that affection should be supremely set upon God. Affection should be set upon the commandments of God. Affection should be set upon the house of worship of God. Affection should be set upon heavenly things. Affection should be set upon Christ. And affection should be set upon the people of God. And if you are here today and you have affection towards God and would wish to be with God in his kingdom when the time comes, and then if you would like to be baptized and be added to the church, we can do that with you tonight. Or if you are here and you give the prayers of this group for any reason, just let your wishes be known as we stand and sing.
I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honor of his word, the glory of his cross. Firm as his throne, his promise stands, and he can well secure what I've committed to his hands till the decisive hour. Then will he own my worthless name before his Father's face, and in the new Jerusalem appoint for me a place. Please be seated.